I'm Claire Bennett, 33, and I've always been the one holding everything together. The responsible daughter, the caregiver, the quiet fixer. So when my sister suggested a lakeside family trip, I planned it all. From the cabin to my mom's emergency insulin. I thought it'd bring us closer. Instead, it nearly broke us. 3 days in, my sister took the only car and my mom's meds, without a word. We missed the boat tour Mom had been looking forward to. Her blood sugar dropped. Hours later, Sierra came back with shopping bags and a scarf. Like that would fix everything. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't just tired. I was invisible. And before I share what happened next, and why I finally stepped away from the role I never asked for, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever been the glue holding your family together until it cracked you open, tap like and subscribe. This story might be yours too. I never thought I'd be the one to ruin our family vacation. That's what my sister said anyway, her exact words, burned into my memory like a brand. You ruined this whole trip, Claire. But it didn't start that way. It was supposed to be a week of peaceful lake views and quiet mornings, a break from the daily grind. A chance for us to reconnect, heal, rewind a few weeks, and you'd see 4 people at a kitchen table in Syracuse. Me, my sister Sierra, and our parents, Evelyn and Robert. Sierra, of course, was glowing. She always is. With her big city charm, perfect lashes, and infectious laugh, she could walk into any room, any restaurant, any rooftop bar in Manhattan, and have a stranger buying her a drink within minutes. She's the kind of person who tells a mediocre story and still gets applause. And she knows it. She knows exactly how to pull people in, including our parents. Me? I'm the one sitting quietly at that same table, making sure Mom gets her pill at the right time, checking if Dad has his annual physical scheduled, and mentally calculating how many sick days I've saved up, in case Mom ends up in the ER again. The roles were written early. Sierra, the golden child with a magnetic personality, and a gift for avoiding responsibility. Claire, me, the safe one, the reliable one, the one who could be counted on to stay quiet, stay calm, and stay out of the way. I wasn't jealous growing up. I didn't need the spotlight. I needed to know someone had their eyes open when Mom started hiding how often she felt dizzy after dinner, when her feet went numb, when her blood sugar numbers started swinging wildly without explanation. I noticed. No one else seemed to. She'd always say she was fine. And maybe she believed that, but I didn't. I knew what she was really saying was, don't make a fuss, don't worry, Sierra. Let her be happy. So I made a fuss, quietly. I researched type 2 diabetes so deeply I could probably pass for a medical resident. I bought her a pill organizer with time-of-day labels, laminated a medication chart, and stuck emergency glucose tabs in every coat she wore. Dad tried, but he's never been good with the details. Sierra called sometimes. Once a week, if we were lucky. She'd ask how Mom was doing, then launch into a 15-minute story about a guy she met at a wine tasting who turned out to be an ex of her college roommate. Her concern was real, I guess, but fleeting. The idea for the vacation was Sierra's. We were all at dinner. Mom had just come back from a rough doctor's visit. Her A1C was higher than ever. Sierra, sipping white wine and scrolling through photos of Vermont cabins on her phone, lit up. You know what we need, she said, like she was about to unveil the cure for stress. That cabin by Lake Elmore that the Danvers stayed at last summer. It's perfect. Quiet, scenic. Mom can finally rest. Dad can fish. Claire, you'll love it too. It'll be so good for all of us. Mom's face lit up like she was seeing the lake already. That sounds wonderful, she said softly, her eyes gleaming in a way I hadn't seen in months. Dad nodded enthusiastically. About time we did something like that again. I hesitated. Summer's busy season at the firm. I'd have to shuffle projects, reschedule a bunch of team meetings. And Mom's condition, was it safe to be so far from a hospital? Were there urgent care centers nearby? What if we didn't have cell signal? But when Mom reached across the table to squeeze Sierra's hand and said, "Thank you, sweetheart," I bit back every logistical concern and smiled instead. "Sure," I said. "Let's do it." "Great, I'll send you guys the link," Sierra said, already unlocking her phone. "I'll look into booking it next week." She didn't. Weeks passed, and she sent a few texts with Airbnb listings, but no follow-through. Mom was too tired to help with the planning, and Dad talked about fishing but didn't lift a finger to prepare. So I stepped in, I booked the cabin, I called the nearest medical center. I built a meal plan that took Mom's dietary needs into account. I printed packing lists, driving directions, insulin management charts. It became my full-time, unpaid second job. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, Sierra called in a panic. "Claire," she whined, "I forgot to ask for vacation days. Any way we can push the trip back a week?" I gripped my phone tight. "Sierra, no, I've rearranged everything. My work, Mom's appointments. I've already submitted the time-off request. This is the window." She sighed dramatically, like I was being unreasonable. "Fine, I'll take unpaid leave, but you owe me." I almost laughed. I don't think she heard the irony. The night before departure, I stayed up until 1 a.m. packing. Not just for me, but for Mom. Meds, monitors, glucose strips, emergency snacks. I created a red binder titled Mom's Health Kit, with every instruction, prescription, and document we might need. I printed 2 copies. As I zipped up the last bag, I looked around the room and told myself maybe, just maybe, this trip would finally shift things. Maybe Dad would see all the effort I put in. Maybe Sierra would step up. Maybe we'd reconnect the way families are supposed to. I had no idea what was actually waiting for us at that cabin, and I definitely didn't realize I was about to become the villain of the story. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., sharp and jarring. I sat up immediately, the tension already buzzing beneath my skin. This was the day. After weeks of planning, phone calls, meal charts, pharmacy runs, and gentle reminders no one asked for, we were finally leaving for Vermont. And as always, I was the first one up. By 6 o'clock, I had double-checked everything. Mom's medication was sorted and neatly labeled. The emergency insulin was chilled in the cooler. I'd packed granola bars, electrolyte water, glucose tablets, and a bright red folder with her dosage schedule clipped to the inside cover. A checklist was taped to the fridge. I even color-coded it. By 7 o'clock, I pulled up in front of my parents' house, our designated meeting spot. I carried in the bags, loaded the cooler with prepped snacks, and tucked Mom's glucose monitor into the front pouch of her overnight tote. She met me at the door, dressed in soft knit pants and a cozy cardigan, even though the July air was already warming up. "I've been up since 5, she whispered, with a tired but hopeful smile, too excited to sleep. Dad was in the kitchen reading a fishing magazine, sipping his second cup of black coffee like it was any other Tuesday. "Morning, Claire," he said, glancing up without much ceremony. "Ready to unplug for a week?" I smiled and nodded, even though my mind was already cataloging where I'd stashed the backup chargers and the map printouts in case the GPS failed. The plan was to leave by 8 o'clock to avoid traffic heading north, which gave us just under an hour to finalize everything. By 7:30, the car was packed. The cooler was in the back, the duffels neatly stacked, my red binder safely nestled between the seats. All we needed was Sierra. 8 o'clock came, nothing. Dad checked his watch. Mom sat near the door, hands clasped, trying not to look anxious. I paced the kitchen, pretending to clean already clean countertops. At 8:15, Dad finally called her. I could hear her voice through the phone speaker, bright and breezy, like we were catching her in the middle of a brunch date, not a trip she'd allegedly helped plan. "Just finishing packing," she chirped. "I'll be there in like 30 minutes, tops." Dad sighed but said, "Okay, drive safe," and hung up. "She lives 15 minutes away," I said quietly, too tired to hide the edge in my voice. "She probably had a late night," Mom said quickly, always the peacemaker. "You know her schedule." "Right, her schedule." While we waited, I triple-checked Mom's blood sugar, topped off the gas tank in Dad's SUV, and repacked the trunk because Sierra's overpacking was a given and I'd made room for it. At 9:10, an hour and 10 minutes late, she finally pulled up, climbing out of her little hybrid in a matching designer tracksuit and oversized sunglasses, holding a still-steaming oat milk latte. Sorry, she called, laughing like we were late to brunch. I couldn't decide on shoes, and then I needed caffeine, or I'd be no good to anyone. Dad took her bags without protest and tried to wedge them into the carefully organized trunk. I watched in silence as he shuffled and unstacked everything I'd arranged. Mom was glowing, just happy to see her eldest. By 9:30, we finally pulled out of the driveway. I ended up in the back seat with Mom, of course. Sierra claimed the front without discussion. "I get motion sick in the back," she said, tossing her bag onto the dash like it was home. I didn't argue. Sitting with Mom meant I could keep an eye on her. I pulled out the snacks, made sure her water was within reach, and mentally recalibrated the schedule I'd built around our original 8 a.m. departure. The delay meant we'd hit lunchtime traffic through Massachusetts, and likely arrive late in the afternoon. So much for easing into the vacation. Sierra spent the first hour regaling us with updates from her life. Her latest client drama, a guy she matched with on Bumble, a pitch she nailed at work that got her a free dinner with her boss. Anyway, she said, turning slightly in her seat to flash me a grin. This trip is going to be exactly what we all need. No stress, no agendas, just vibes, right? I smiled back, but I didn't answer. Because there was an agenda, it just wasn't hers. Around noon, we stopped at a retro-style diner in a small Massachusetts town, all chrome and red vinyl. As we slid into a booth, I discreetly checked the time and then Mom's glucose level under the table. Grilled chicken salad should be good for you, I murmured, scanning the menu. Light dressing. Oh my God, Sierra groaned. Let her eat what she wants for once, Claire. We're on vacation. It's fine, Mom said quickly, placing her hand gently on my arm. The salad sounds great. When the food arrived, Sierra sent her burger back because it was medium well, not medium rare. We waited another 15 minutes while she chatted with the waiter about cooking temps and meat texture. I watched Mom's color fade, her hands tremble slightly. She smiled through it. Of course she did. Did you take your noon meds? I asked softly. Mom nodded. I'm just tired from sitting so long. I'll be fine once we're back on the road. Sierra spent the next leg of the drive asleep in the passenger seat. Dad hummed along to his old rock playlist. I watched the trees blur past the window and tried not to think about the 3 more hours ahead. Somewhere near the Vermont border, Mom dozed off beside me. I stared out the window, tired but hopeful. Maybe once we arrived, once we stepped out of the car and breathed in that lake air, everything would shift. We'd leave behind the schedules and the expectations. Maybe I'd stop feeling like the background character in my own family, but I should have known. Dysfunction doesn't disappear with scenery. It travels with you, packed neatly in the trunk beside the cooler and the duffels, disguised in laughter, waiting to spill out just when you think you found peace. And when we finally saw the lake cabin for the first time, beautiful and serene, I thought, for one fragile moment, that we'd made it. I didn't realize we'd already started breaking. The lake was breathtaking. That part, at least, lived up to the brochure. As we rounded the last bend in the gravel road, the trees opened up to reveal a glassy sheet of water, perfectly still, framed by pines and scattered with fire-colored kayaks. The cabin stood just above the shoreline, rustic, hand-hewn, with wide windows and a wraparound deck that hugged the entire structure, like a generous embrace. For the first time since morning, I felt my shoulders ease down from my ears. Mom gasped softly from the back seat. It's even more beautiful than I imagined. Sierra sat up, finally off her phone. Oh wow, the Danvers didn't oversell this place at all. This is Instagram gold. Dad pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires, and turned off the engine. For a moment, we all just sat there, letting the silence of the place settle over us. It was the kind of silence you couldn't find back home, the kind that wrapped itself around your bones, soft and cool and clean. I was the first one out of the car. I opened the back door for Mom and helped her down carefully, then went straight to unloading. There was no delegation, there never had to be. Everyone just assumed I would know what to do, and I always did. Inside, the cabin was all honey-colored wood and cozy charm. High ceilings, a stone fireplace, a kitchen that opened into the living space, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, enough space to breathe, not enough to escape. I call the room with the lake view, Sierra sang out, heading down the hall like it was a race she'd already won. Dad chuckled. Your mother and I will take the master then. Claire, you're good with the small one in the back. It wasn't a question. Of course, I said, lifting the emergency cooler into the kitchen. The back room overlooked the driveway. No lake, no breeze, just the dusty road we came in on. It was fine. It was always fine. While Dad tried to figure out how the gas grill worked, and Mom unpacked her tote, I got to work. I organized the kitchen, insulin and meds on one side of the counter, snacks on the other. I pulled out the laminated schedule, taped it to the fridge. I sorted recyclables from trash. I made it home. Dinner was grilled chicken and foil-wrapped vegetables. eaten outside as the sky turned from gold to purple. The water shimmered with the last of the day's light. It should have been perfect, and in a way, it was. This really was a wonderful idea, Mom said, reaching across the table to squeeze Sierra's hand. Sierra smiled. I'm just glad I could get us all here. No one corrected her. No one mentioned the bookings I made, the hours I spent researching diabetic-friendly restaurants within 30 miles, or the calls to Mom's insurance about out-of-network prescriptions. It was her idea. Therefore, it was her win. I chewed slowly, swallowing not just my dinner, but the bitter lump in my throat. It wasn't worth the fight. Not tonight. Not yet. That night, I lay in the narrow twin bed in the back room, listening to the creaks and groans of the old cabin as it settled into darkness. I could hear the soft lapping of the lake in the distance, and faintly, the hum of Sierra's voice through the thin wall as she FaceTimed someone. I couldn't make out the words, but the laugh, her signature, show-stopping, magnetic laugh, came through loud and clear. At 6:30 the next morning, I was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, pancake batter whisked smooth in a ceramic bowl, blueberry pancakes, Mom's favorite, adapted to be low sugar, high fiber. She deserved something good. She deserved someone noticing. She joined me at 7 o'clock, her hair still damp from a shower, looking more rested than I'd seen her in weeks. It smells amazing in here, she said, kissing my cheek. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. It's not trouble, I said, flipping a pancake onto the griddle. I thought we could eat early and go on that hike we talked about. Claire, you've thought of everything. Not everything, apparently. At 8:30, Sierra still hadn't emerged from her room. The pancakes were on a covered plate. The table was set. Mom was sipping tea, glancing anxiously down the hall. She probably had a late night, Dad offered again, like it was a valid excuse in perpetuity. She said she wanted to do the hike, I said quietly. She wants to do a lot of things, I added in my head, but didn't say aloud. At 9:15, Mom knocked gently on Sierra's door. Sierra emerged in silk pajamas, hair tousled, mascara still clinging to her lashes. Morning, she said, yawning. Are we doing something today? We were going to hike the lake loop, I said, trying to keep my voice level. We talked about it last night. Oh, right, totally forgot. Give me 15. 15 became 40. By the time she joined us, fully dressed, hair curled, lipstick applied, the sun was already high and the heat pressing in. We'll need to take the short trail, I said, scanning the map. It's already too hot for the full loop, especially for Mom. Sierra frowned. But I wanted to see the lookout point. That's the whole reason I brought my camera. Then we can try again tomorrow, I said, not looking up. The shortened trail wound through a shady pine forest, the air thick and humid. Dad walked ahead with Sierra, their voices rising in bursts of laughter and shared memories. I stayed back with Mom, monitoring her pace, watching for signs of fatigue. She slowed halfway in, her hand on her chest. Let's rest, I said, guiding her to a mossy log. She sat down gratefully. I'm fine, she said, smiling weakly. Just not as strong as I used to be. You're doing great, I told her, handing her water. But let's head back. We returned to the cabin just before noon. Sierra sprawled on the deck with a book and sunglasses, feet kicked up, while I helped Mom to bed. Her sugar was slightly elevated, not dangerous, but a sign we were pushing too hard. That afternoon, I prepped a light lunch while Dad went fishing and Sierra sunbathed. When we gathered to eat, I suggested we try a seafood place in town later that night. It had stellar reviews and plenty of healthy options. Sierra cut me off. Actually, I met some locals on the dock. They recommended this other place, the Boathouse Grill, super authentic, less touristy. Do they have diabetic-friendly options? I asked, knowing the answer. Sierra rolled her eyes. Claire, not everything has to be about that. I'm sure they have a salad. Dad clapped his hands. Sounds great. Let's try the local place. Mom caught my eye and gave me a small shrug. And just like that, the plan shifted. Again. But what they didn't know was I had already started writing things down. I wasn't just keeping track of Mom's glucose levels anymore. I was keeping track of every moment I disappeared just to make everything else seem okay. And soon, it wouldn't be okay anymore, because the cracks were deepening, and I was tired of pretending we weren't already sinking. If there was one thing Mom had been looking forward to on this trip, it was the boat tour. 3 hours on Lake Elmore, with a local guide pointing out wildlife, hidden coves, and the old stone lighthouse on the northern edge of the lake. It was perfect. Low effort, low stress, and exactly the kind of experience that didn't require her to hike through heat or sit through Sierra's spontaneous social experiments. We had booked it weeks ago, paid the deposit, set alarms. We even planned a simple breakfast that morning so we'd be ready to leave by 10:15. The marina was a 20-minute drive, and they asked us to arrive early for check-in. I had everything lined up. At 6:45 a.m., I was already in the kitchen, muffins baking, Mom's meds ready, the red folder, as always, on the counter. I could feel the calm of the lake outside, still untouched by the day, seeping through the window panes. For once, I let myself enjoy the stillness. Today would go right. It had to. At 8:30, Mom emerged from the bedroom with a gentle smile and better color in her face than she'd had all week. She sat at the table and sipped coffee while I plated the muffins and quietly checked her glucose level. It was solid, better than yesterday. Dad wandered out next, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Beautiful morning," he said, stretching. "Feels like the kind of day the water was made for." "We'll need to head out by 10:15, I reminded him, "to stay on schedule for the boat." He nodded. "I'll wake Sierra at 9:30. But 9:30 came and went. No sound from Sierra's room. At 9:40, Dad knocked. No answer. At 9:45, he knocked louder, then cracked the door. "She's not here," he said, frowning. "Her bed hasn't been slept in." Mom stiffened in her chair. "What do you mean not here?" Dad pulled out his phone and tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I walked to the door. The car keys, the ones Dad had left on the hook near the entry, were gone. My stomach dropped. "She took the car," I said flatly. Without telling anyone, I walked outside, confirming what I already knew. Dad's SUV was gone. So was Mom's emergency insulin. The small cooler I had packed the night before, clearly labeled with a frozen gel pack, glucose tabs, and her backup medication, had been left on the front seat of that car. For convenience, for safety. And now it was gone. "I don't understand," Mom murmured. "She wouldn't just leave without—" She stopped herself, because maybe Sierra would. Dad tried calling again. No answer. I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. "We're supposed to be at the marina in 30 minutes. "We'll wait," Dad said. "We don't know when she'll be back," I replied. "And Mom's emergency meds are in that car." "She's taken her morning dose," Dad pointed out. "That's not the point." I kept my voice even, but inside I was spiraling. "We don't know if her levels will stay stable. What if she has a drop? What if she needs the insulin while we're out?" Mom reached for my hand. "I feel okay right now, Claire." "You shouldn't have to just feel okay. You should be safe." At 10 o'clock, we still hadn't heard anything. No calls, no texts. The boat tour was scheduled to depart at 11 o'clock sharp. Non-refundable after check-in. I checked my watch, then my phone, then the driveway again. Still empty. By 10:30, I made the call to cancel. I could barely hear the receptionist over the pounding in my ears as she told me there was a 50% cancellation fee. I gave my card number and thanked her with tight, polite words. Then I sat on the edge of the deck and stared at the gravel, wondering how many times I had paid, literally and figuratively, for Sierra's inability to consider anyone but herself. Around 11 o'clock, Mom stood in the doorway, pale but composed. "I'm fine," she said again, though I could hear the crack in her voice. "I don't want you to worry." But I did. I always did. I looked up local options and found a small pharmacy in a nearby town. "I'm going to see if I can get a temporary refill," I said, already picking up my bag. Dad looked hesitant. "Maybe we wait just a little longer. She'll probably be back soon." "She probably shouldn't have taken the only car without telling us," I snapped before I could stop myself. To his credit, he didn't argue. I found a local boat taxi service online, an older man named Mitch, who ferried cabin renters across the lake to town. He pulled up 20 minutes later, a small motorboat bobbing gently at our dock. "I heard it was a medication emergency," he said kindly, as I helped Mom into the boat. "You're not the first folks I've ferried in a bind." The trip across the lake was quiet, breezy, the exact kind of ride we'd planned to enjoy hours earlier, under completely different circumstances. The pharmacy was kind and understanding. With Mom's medical ID and insurance number, they were able to issue a temporary supply. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but I paid without blinking. By the time we got back to the cabin, it was after 2:30. The SUV still wasn't in the driveway. The cooler, the meds, the car, still missing. Mom lay down to rest, and Dad paced, called again, left voicemails, one after another. Finally, at 3:52 p.m., the car pulled in. Sierra stepped out, carrying shopping bags, wearing a sun hat I hadn't seen before. "Hey," she said brightly. "Sorry, my phone died. I had no idea you guys were trying to reach me." I stood there, silent, my fists clenched so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. Dad stepped forward, his voice tight. "Where were you?" "Oh, just in town. I ran into some friends from college. We grabbed brunch and did some shopping. It was so random." "You took the car," I said, "and Mom's insulin." Sierra blinked. "I didn't know it was in there." "You didn't ask." She shrugged. "I didn't think it'd be a big deal." "You didn't think at all," I said. She frowned. "Okay, no need to be dramatic." "We had to cancel the boat, and Mom's sugar was unstable," Dad added. Sierra opened one of the shopping bags and pulled out a scarf. "I bought this for Mom. Thought she'd like the colors." She said it like it fixed everything, like a pretty thing could replace a ruined day. That was when I knew. She wasn't just careless. She was dangerous in her thoughtlessness. And if no one made her face it, she'd never stop breaking things, one decision at a time. And tomorrow, she would break even more. The scarf was silk. Hand-dyed, Sierra claimed, from a really cool boutique downtown run by a woman who makes everything herself. She held it up like a peace offering, draping it across Mom's lap with a flourish. "See, your colors, sage green and coral, just like that sweater you love." Mom smiled, politely, running her fingers along the fabric. "It's lovely, sweetheart, thank you." But her eyes met mine for just a second, and I could see it. The exhaustion, the quiet heartbreak of a day derailed, her health once again compromised by someone else's whims. She was grateful for the gift, yes, but the cost? She was too tired to count it anymore. That night, after a quiet dinner and an early bedtime for Mom, I sat alone on the deck with a cup of herbal tea, staring out over the water. The stars reflected off the lake like coins dropped into a wishing well. I wished for silence, peace. A single day without drama, without fire to put out. Without being the person who had to see it all and hold it all together. Behind me, I could hear Sierra on the phone again, laughing. She hadn't apologized. Not really, not for taking the car, not for missing the boat, not for nearly putting Mom at risk. In her mind, we should have just gone with the flow. That's her phrase. Go with the flow, Claire. Funny how the flow always led wherever she wanted to go. The next morning, I was already packing up a picnic by the time Dad stumbled into the kitchen, looking for coffee. Mom joined us shortly after, pale but in better spirits. I had planned something simple. A quiet walk to the shaded clearing near the cove we'd passed earlier, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, fruit, cucumber salad, and sugar-free lemonade. Something gentle, something slow, something safe. At 10:15, as we were gathering our things, Mom knocked on Sierra's door. "Picnic sounds fun," Sierra said when she emerged, dressed, made up, texting as she spoke. "And I might have invited a couple people to join us. Hope that's okay." I froze mid-step. "What people?" "Just some friends I met on the dock yesterday, Jake, Troy, and Jake's sister, Aubrey. Super chill. Locals. They said there's this beer from a nearby brewery Dad would love. I figured it'd be fun." "You invited strangers to a family picnic?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "They're not strangers," she said breezily. "We had coffee and talked about sustainable farming and music. You'd like them, actually." Dad, of course, was already intrigued by the mention of local beer. "Always good to meet locals," he muttered as he slung the picnic basket over his shoulder. Mom looked uncertain, but smiled anyway. "It'll be nice to have some fresh faces." Fresh faces, in a cabin where we couldn't even finish a boat ride without disaster. We walked to the cove, a shaded clearing just off the water, with weathered picnic tables and pine needles crunching underfoot. It was peaceful, quiet. I laid out the food, set the plates, poured water, and watched the dock in the distance. A sleek motorboat appeared 20 minutes later, gliding across the lake like something from a catalog ad. And then there they were, 3 people with tanned arms, big laughs, and confident energy that sucked the calm right out of the space. Jake was tall, golden-haired, with mirrored sunglasses and a booming voice. Troy had a scruffy beard, a 6-pack of craft beer, and a flask that he kept tucking back into his cargo shorts. Aubrey, the sister, was smaller, stylish, with a nose ring and a soft voice that didn't match the bravado of her companions. "Hey fam," Jake called as he hopped onto the dock. "We brought the fun," Sierra lit up. "Told you they were great." Introductions flew by, beer was cracked open, and suddenly my quiet family moment had become a scene from someone else's weekend getaway. Jake took a long look at Mom's untouched plate and asked, "Not hungry? You on a diet or something?" Mom blinked, clearly taken off guard. "Just watching my sugar," she said gently. "Oh, diabetes? Man, my uncle had that. Lost a toe. Brutal stuff. You should try this cinnamon bark supplement my buddy sells. Drops your blood sugar right down." I gritted my teeth. "She's following her doctor's orders." Jake waved a dismissive hand. "Doctors just want to keep you hooked on pills. Nature knows best." I opened my mouth to respond, but Sierra jumped in. "Jake runs a wellness store, Claire. He's just passionate." Troy offered Dad a shot of something he called maple shine. "Homemade. Burns a little, heals a lot," he laughed. Mom declined. I did too. "Sierra?" She toasted and downed hers with a dramatic wince. I watched her laugh and flirt and let these strangers, literal strangers, take over the one part of the trip I had actually planned. And when one of them dropped their frisbee onto our picnic table, scattering grapes and flipping a sandwich onto the ground, they just laughed. "Oops," Troy called. 5-second rule, right?" I stared at the ruined food, the beer spilling over the wood, the sunburned smiles. I looked at Mom, tired, quiet, trying to be gracious. "We need to get back," I said, my voice low. "Mom's sugar is dipping. She needs to rest." Jake waved me off. "She looks fine. Give her a granola bar." "No," I said firmly. "We're leaving." Sierra frowned. "Claire, don't be so dramatic. They came all this way." "I didn't invite them, and I don't remember this being your party." "Oh my God," she groaned. "You act like everything is a crisis." "Because everything becomes a crisis when you're involved." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Troy stood and shrugged. "Hey, if we're not welcome—" "You're not," I said flatly. Sierra turned to them, flustered. "No, don't leave. We'll go back to the cabin. Hang out there." "Absolutely not," I said. "Mom needs rest, and they've had more alcohol than food." Dad stepped forward then, finally, clearing his throat. "This isn't the best time. Maybe another day." And Sierra's face, the face that had always known charm was a currency, twisted. She turned on me, venomous. "You just hate when I have fun, don't you?" I didn't respond. I just picked up the ruined sandwich, wrapped it tightly, and dropped it into the trash. And as I packed up the picnic basket, again, I knew this wasn't just about a lunch that had gone wrong. It was about boundaries. Ones she never saw. And ones I was finally done letting her cross. Tomorrow I would find out just how far she was willing to push, and just how much it would cost all of us. By the time we trudged back to the cabin, the sky had taken on that dull gray tint of late afternoon heat, and the lake no longer sparkled. It just sat there, flat and silent, like it was holding its breath. Mom's steps were slower than usual, her shoulders slightly hunched forward, but she insisted she was fine. I didn't believe her. I hovered nearby anyway, watching her like I always did, measuring every twitch of her hands and blink of her eyes like a nurse on high alert. She was pushing through the exhaustion again, doing that thing she always did, masking her discomfort to avoid conflict, to avoid being a burden. But this wasn't just discomfort. This was a bad idea that had gone exactly the way I'd predicted, and no one wanted to say it out loud. Sierra stayed behind on the dock with her beer buddies. Jake's ridiculous playlist echoed faintly over the water, all thumping bass and overconfident lyrics. I wasn't surprised. Of course she wasn't coming back with us. She always left when things got inconvenient. When Mom started looking pale, when people got quiet, when it stopped being fun. I got Mom inside and helped her onto the couch with a cool cloth and a glass of water while Dad flipped through channels on the TV like the act of pretending this was normal would somehow make it so. At some point, Mom murmured she was cold, and I helped her to the bedroom where she curled up on top of the blanket, small and fragile in a way that made my throat burn. While Mom rested, I went into the kitchen and started cleaning up the wreckage of the picnic that hadn't been a picnic. Soggy sandwiches, opened beer bottles I didn't recognize. My neatly packed meal plan trampled on, literally and metaphorically. Every slice of cucumber, every label I'd written, felt like a wasted effort. I stood there washing dishes I didn't dirty, replaying the way Jake had talked about Mom's diabetes like it was a punchline, how Sierra had rolled her eyes at the idea of accountability, how no one had defended me, not even Dad. I could still hear the sound of Troy's laugh, echoing around the cove after he knocked over the lemonade pitcher and called it a party foul. I hadn't said anything then, but the silence was over. Something had shifted. A boat motor growled to life outside, growing louder by the second. I moved to the window and peered out. There they were, Jake behind the wheel, Troy beside him holding what looked like a second cooler, Aubrey in a swimsuit top, and Sierra perched on the bow like she was starring in her own travel documentary. As the boat docked, I watched Sierra toss her hair and laugh at something Jake said. She looked completely at ease, completely detached, like this wasn't a family vacation, like she was just passing through someone else's story. Within minutes, they were back on the deck. Sierra flung the door open, music pouring in before she even said a word. "Don't worry," she called breezily. "We're just hanging out here. We won't bother Mom." Jake set up his Bluetooth speaker and immediately reconnected it to his phone. Loud pop music blasted through the stillness. Troy brought out a new round of drinks and handed one to Sierra. Aubrey wandered inside, brushing past me on her way to the bathroom, humming as she went like she owned the place. "She told us your family's loaded," Aubrey said casually on her way back out. "Like multiple vacation homes and old money kind of stuff. I figured this was just one of them." She paused, eyeing the wooden paneling. Cute rustic vibes, by the way. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My jaw locked so tightly it ached. I walked back into the kitchen in silence, replaying her words. That lie, that blatant fabrication, felt like a slap. Sierra had been rewriting our family history to impress strangers. Again. I looked toward the deck and caught a glimpse of her, mid-story, hands animated. "I was 16, she said, laughing. "I took Dad's car and drove to Montreal for a concert. Mom totally covered for me. She made me promise not to tell." Dad looked confused. "That never happened," he said. "I'd remember that." Sierra brushed him off. "You were asleep. You had no idea. Mom knew, right, Mom?" Mom had come out of the bedroom just in time to hear it. Her face, drained of color, tightened. "That's not true," she said quietly. I stepped out onto the deck. "Enough," I said, my voice sharper than it had ever been in front of them. Sierra turned toward me, eyes flashing. "What now, Claire? You lied to our guests. You turned a family trip into a frat party. You put Mom in danger. And now you're rewriting our childhood to make yourself look edgy?" "It's just a story," she said, waving a hand. "Relax." "Mom was sick," I snapped. "Today, yesterday, this entire trip, and you don't care." Sierra laughed bitterly. "She's always sick when you need an excuse to micromanage." "She nearly passed out today," I hissed. "I had to cancel everything, again, because you took the car without telling anyone. And left us without her medication, and you didn't even text." "I didn't know the meds were in there," she shot back. "I'm not a mind reader." "No, you're just selfish," I said, each word clean and slow. "And reckless, and you've been enabled your whole life." That one hit. Her face flickered just for a second before she masked it with a scoff. "You're jealous," she said, "because I have friends, because I don't revolve my identity around Mom's pill bottles." "I revolve around keeping her alive," I said, "and you revolve around yourself." Jake stood awkwardly, raising both hands. "Okay, maybe we should bounce. This is getting—" "No, we're staying," Sierra interrupted. "Claire doesn't get to run the show all the time." Dad finally stepped forward, jaw tight. "Sierra, that's enough. You and your friends need to leave, now." Sierra looked stunned. "You're siding with her?" Dad didn't answer, but his silence said everything. Troy shrugged. "We'll head out," he muttered, already grabbing his things. Sierra didn't move. "I'll go with them. At least they're not emotionally constipated." "You're not sleeping at some stranger's house," I said. "I'm 33, not 13. "Then act like it." She stared at me, fire behind her eyes. "You've always hated me." "I wanted a sister," I said. "What I got was someone who treats her family like a set piece for her social media." She spun, storming off. "Don't wait up." The boat roared to life and disappeared into the dusk. And just like that, she was gone. Not a word to Mom. No glance back. The cabin felt cavernous now. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe, but stings. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe it wasn't Sierra Who needed to leave next? Maybe it was me. I couldn't sleep that night. The silence that followed Sierra's departure wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that rings in your ears and leaves a sour taste behind. The kind that feels earned, but not exactly victorious. I lay awake in the little twin bed, staring at the pine ceiling beams, listening for any sounds, Mom's footsteps, Dad's coughing, the distant churn of a boat engine. But the house was still. The stillness felt unnatural, like a lull in a storm that wasn't over, only paused. At 6:00 a.m., I got out of bed and started making coffee. It was muscle memory at this point. Grind, scoop, brew, pour. I didn't even need to think. I just needed to move. As the rich scent filled the cabin, I stood at the window watching the lake fog drift lazily across the surface. It looked exactly the same as when we arrived, but I wasn't. By the time Mom emerged, robe wrapped tightly around her shoulders, I had already decided. "I'm going home tomorrow," I said, before she could ask how I slept, or offer a soft smile to diffuse the tension. She paused in the doorway, one hand on the frame. "You mean back to Albany?" I nodded. "I'll make you and Dad breakfast in the morning, help you both get settled for the rest of the week. But I'm done. I can't stay here anymore." She moved slowly to the table and sat down, her movements more deliberate than usual. Her eyes searched mine for something, hesitation, doubt, guilt, but I was empty, not angry, not bitter, just done. "I know this trip hasn't been easy," she said gently. "It hasn't been a trip," I replied. "It's been a series of emergencies. I planned this entire thing so you could rest. Instead, I've spent every day cleaning up after Sierra, monitoring your sugar, negotiating between you, Dad, and her like it's a full-time job. And I already have one of those." "I never asked you to take all of that on," she said softly. "But you expected it," I said. "You didn't need to say it. It's always just been assumed." She didn't argue. She didn't need to. We both knew I was right. Dad came out of the bedroom a few minutes later, already dressed, clearly trying to avoid eye contact. He poured himself coffee and joined us at the table like it was any other day. Like his eldest daughter hadn't stormed out last night threatening to sleep at a stranger's house after screaming that her family hated her. "I'll drive back with you if you want," he offered. I shook my head. "You should stay with Mom. This was supposed to be her vacation." He looked at Mom, then back at me. "I'm sorry, Claire." I nodded. "Me too." I spent the rest of the day in a strange kind of limbo. I helped Mom reorganize her meds, took inventory of what she had left, and made a list of anything they might need before the week ended. I left instructions, actual printed instructions, for managing her glucose in high heat, how to adjust meals if she missed a dose, where the nearest urgent care clinic was. I typed out the list, printed 2 copies, and stuck one to the fridge. By late afternoon, I was back in my room folding my clothes into the suitcase. It felt surreal. I'd imagined so many versions of this trip over the past few months, but none of them ended with me voluntarily walking away from my family in the middle of it. I zipped the bag slowly, running my hand across the canvas top. It wasn't guilt I felt. It was grief. Grief for what this vacation could have been. Grief for the family I kept trying to believe we were. At dinner, Mom made an effort to sit up straighter, put on lipstick, act like everything was fine. She thanked me for the salmon I cooked and asked about my work schedule next week. Dad talked about fishing again, about how maybe tomorrow he'd try the deeper end of the lake. No one said Sierra's name until she walked in. At 7:42 p.m., the front door creaked open, and there she was. Dressed in a borrowed hoodie, hair pulled back, eyes red and puffy. She paused when she saw us all sitting at the table, our half-empty plates and 2 bright expressions freezing mid-bite. "You're back," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sierra nodded and set her bag down by the door. "I'm not here to fight." No one said anything for a beat too long. "I heard your voice from the dock," she added, glancing at me. I figured it was safe to come back. I stood and carried my plate to the sink. I didn't need to listen to another deflection or half-apology laced with sarcasm. I'd heard them all before. But then she said something I didn't expect. "I'm sorry," I turned slightly. "For what?" "For everything," she said. "For the car, for the boat, for not checking in, for being whatever version of me you've had to tolerate your whole life." I blinked, unsure if it was genuine or just her latest strategy to reset the dynamic. "I know you don't believe me," she added. And honestly, that's fair. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was too tired to unpack whether she meant it or just didn't want to be left out again. After a long pause, she asked, "Are you really leaving?" "Yes." "Because of me?" "Partly," I said, "but mostly because I've let myself be invisible for so long. I forgot what it felt like to take up space." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not great at being reliable. I've always been the fun one, the spontaneous one. And maybe that's just a way of hiding how much I don't trust myself to handle anything real." I didn't have a reply. Not a kind one. Not one that would fix this. So I just nodded. "I'll take Mom's blood sugar tomorrow," she said suddenly. "You don't have to do it." It was the smallest gesture, a fragile bridge held together by duct tape. And maybe, just maybe, a little sincerity. But it was too late for now. "I'll be up early," I told her. "If you're serious, wake up with me and I'll show you how." "Okay," she said. That night, the cabin was quiet again, but different. Less hollow, still broken, but not beyond repair. And for the first time, I didn't dream of leaving. I dreamed of what it might feel like to stay on my terms. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of overcast hush that presses gently against the windows and makes everything feel a little more fragile. I was already up before the alarm, not because I had to be, but because my body still hadn't figured out how to rest. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, putting the kettle on, slicing fruit, prepping breakfast quietly so I wouldn't wake anyone. This was supposed to be my last morning here. I'd packed most of my things the night before. My bag sat zipped by the front door. I'd even written a note with reminders for Mom's meds in case I left before she was fully awake. That was the plan. Leave with dignity. No scenes. At 7:15, Sierra shuffled in. No makeup, hoodie zipped all the way up, hair frizzy and damp from either the lake or the shower. I couldn't tell which. She rubbed her eyes and blinked at the mug I slid toward her. Chamomile. I hadn't asked what she liked. I didn't care. But I wasn't going to withhold kindness either. She took it without a word and sat at the table, yawning like someone who didn't know what to do with the silence between us. "You said you wanted to learn," I said, sliding the glucose monitor and testing kit across the table. She nodded, chewing her lip. "Yeah, I do." I walked her through the steps. How to use the lancet, where to prick, how to hold Mom's hand steady so it didn't shake too much. She listened for once, not interrupting, not joking her way out of discomfort, just watching. When I placed the meter in her hand, she hesitated for half a second, then did it exactly right. The number blinked on the screen, higher than ideal, but not dangerous. "Now what?" she asked. I walked her through the options. A light breakfast, water, no insulin needed yet. She nodded again, biting her lip harder now, like she was trying not to say something. I didn't press her. I just handed her a banana and got to work making oatmeal. By 8 o'clock, Mom was up and joined us at the table, still moving slow, but visibly surprised to see Sierra already dressed, engaged, monitoring her health with actual interest. Dad followed shortly after, his usual paper cup of coffee in hand, looking like he hadn't expected to see all three of us sitting down like civilized people. "I'll take over today," I said quietly, breaking the silence. "But I'm still leaving." Mom's face fell, just slightly. "I was hoping. Maybe you'd changed your mind." I shook my head. "I need this, Mom. I need space to breathe. You're going to be okay." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You gave us more than enough." We finished breakfast in an almost normal rhythm, the kind that feels rehearsed from years of routine, but still carries too much unspoken under the surface. I helped Mom back to her room to rest and checked her meds one more time. Then I zipped my bag, grabbed my keys, and loaded everything into the back seat of my car. Dad came out onto the porch with me, one hand in his pocket, the other shielding his eyes from the sun that had finally decided to break through the clouds. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm sure," I said. "But I'll be back on Saturday to drive you guys home." He nodded. "You've been more than any of us deserved this week." I didn't say anything. There wasn't much left to say. As I slid into the driver's seat and turned the ignition, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Call me when you get there safe. I love you, honey." I blinked hard, took a breath, and pulled onto the gravel path that led back to the main road. Each pine tree that passed by the window felt like a small step toward freedom. Not escape exactly, just Oxygen. I didn't go far. Just 30 minutes down the road to a small inn near the edge of the state park. I checked into a quiet room overlooking the woods and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, listening to the hum of the air conditioning. No one needed me here. No one knew me here. The weight I'd carried all week was still pressing against my ribs, but now I could feel the difference. When the responsibility wasn't mine, the silence didn't feel sharp. It felt like healing. I ordered a pizza, watched a documentary I didn't finish, called Mom to let her know I'd arrived. She sounded tired but stable. Sierra had helped with lunch. Dad was out fishing. Everything was calm, she said. Though her voice held that hesitation I'd learned to read. It wasn't perfect. But it wasn't a crisis either. The next morning, I hiked, alone. Just me, my steps, and the sound of birds cutting through the branches. It was simple, ordinary, and more refreshing than anything I'd felt in weeks. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Mom. I had a little scare, she said, her voice thin. My heart jumped. What happened? Blood sugar dropped. I got dizzy. She paused. Your father helped. Sierra brought juice. They handled it. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Are you okay now? I am. I just wanted to hear your voice. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. I'm glad you called. We stayed on the line for a few more minutes, talking about nothing. Birds, breakfast, the lake temperature. But it meant something. For once, I wasn't the one saving the day. And still, the world didn't fall apart. As the sun began to set behind the pines, I sat on the tiny balcony with a cup of tea and realized something I hadn't dared let myself believe before. They could learn. Maybe not quickly, maybe not perfectly, but they could. And if they didn't, I was finally ready to stop carrying what was never mine to hold. Tomorrow, I'd drive back to the cabin, not because they needed me, but because I chose to show up. On my terms. I pulled into the gravel driveway just after 10 a.m., the tires crunching the same way they had the first day we arrived. But this time, the sound didn't make my stomach twist. This time, I wasn't bracing myself for a new disaster or some selfish surprise. I stepped out of the car slowly, taking in the scene. The familiar wraparound porch, the thick scent of pine sap in the air, the way the breeze off the lake curled around my ankles like a gentle reminder that yes, I had left. And yes, I had come back. The cabin looked peaceful, still, but not frozen. I grabbed my overnight bag and headed toward the front door, half expecting to hear music blaring or someone calling for me from the kitchen. But instead, I opened the door to the soft clink of plates being stacked, and a quiet hum. Sierra's voice, barely above a whisper, singing along to something low and old playing from the radio. She was in the kitchen, hair tied up, wearing one of Dad's oversized flannel shirts. She didn't look up right away, but when she did, her face softened. Not in surprise, not in guilt, but something more honest. Relief, maybe. Hey, she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You're early. I figured it was better to ease into the end of the week, I said. Less whiplash. She smiled faintly. Fair. I looked around. The table was cleared, the floor swept. Mom's red folder was open on the counter, and her glucose kit sat beside it, used but cleaned, with a new lancet already loaded. I didn't say anything about it, but she must have seen the way my eyes lingered. She was at 101 this morning, Sierra offered. We had oatmeal and strawberries. I counted the carbs, like you taught me. You remembered? I asked. I wrote it all down after you showed me, she said, a little defensive, but not cold. I wanted to make sure I didn't screw it up. That caught me off guard. Not the fact that she did it, though that was new, but the fact that she wanted to not mess it up. It wasn't performative. There was no audience here, just her, Mom, and Dad. And she'd stayed. Where is she? I asked, setting my bag down by the door. Napping. She wanted to go down to the dock this morning, so we all had breakfast early. You and Dad too? She nodded. We all went. He even skipped fishing for once. I raised an eyebrow. Impressive. Yeah, well, he taught me how to use the monitor and kept checking the time like a hawk. Said he didn't want to be the one to mess up Mom's rhythm. That made me laugh. That sounds like him. I started unpacking, moving into the rhythm of the house again, but it didn't feel like stepping back into chaos. It felt like returning to something cautiously hopeful. At one point, I noticed a new notepad on the fridge. Sierra's handwriting, jagged but legible, tracking Mom's sugar levels with the date and time. plus what she'd eaten. There were little notes: 2 strawberries, eggs, 2 carbs, and ask Claire about dinner pasta. I didn't expect the sharp wave of emotion that rose up in my chest. I looked away before she could see it. We spent the next hour in parallel motion, me folding towels, her tidying up the bathroom, neither of us forcing small talk. It was the quietest we'd ever coexisted without resentment simmering just below the surface. At one point, I caught her watching me from the hallway mirror, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. I let it sit. Sometimes the silence was more honest than the words. When Mom woke up, I met her in the hallway with a fresh glass of water. She looked stronger, less frail. There was color in her face again. She pulled me into a hug that lasted just a few seconds longer than usual. "You smell like the woods," she said, half laughing. "It's nice. I went hiking yesterday," I said. "First time in years." "You should do it more," she said. "You always come back softer, like you've been refilled." I didn't respond, but I held her hand for a while as we walked back to the kitchen. Dad was already brewing a second pot of coffee. He grunted his hello and squeezed my shoulder, his version of saying he missed me. The rest of the day passed without tension. No sudden detours, no emotional landmines. We sat on the deck after lunch, watching the lake shimmer while Sierra read out loud from some dog-eared paperback she found in the cabin's bookshelf. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. Later that evening, as I set the table for dinner, Sierra handed me a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" I asked. "Just something I wrote about Mom, about that night I took the car." I didn't open it right away. I just looked at her. "Why now?" "Because you're leaving soon," she said. "And I don't want you thinking I only change when you're here." I put the note in my pocket. "I'll read it later." She nodded. "Good, I'm not ready to hear what you think yet anyway." The sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting gold along the water's edge. Mom was humming something under her breath while she sliced cucumbers. Dad was lighting the grill, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was managing a crisis. I felt like I was part of something that was, if not healing, at least shifting in a direction that didn't require me to break myself to keep it upright. The air smelled like charcoal and lake salt. Sierra brought out plates without being asked. And for the first time, I didn't carry the weight of everyone else. I simply belonged. The last morning at the cabin didn't come with fanfare. No dramatic sunrise. No final confrontation. Just the subtle shift of air that told you summer was inching toward its end. The lake was flat, almost metallic in the early light. I woke before my alarm, not out of tension, but habit. And for once, I didn't feel dread in my bones. Just the soft kind of ache that comes when you know something is ending, and this time, you're not leaving wreckage behind. I moved through the kitchen quietly, making coffee the way I always had. Except this time, Sierra was already up, sitting cross-legged at the table in her hoodie, flipping through the notepad with Mom's sugar logs. She didn't look at me right away, but I could tell she'd been awake for a while. Her eyes were soft, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, a sort of internal tired, like she'd finally stopped running from something. "I didn't mess it up," she said after a moment, tapping the page. "I know," I said, setting her mug down beside her. She was at 96 this morning. I gave her a half slice of toast and some peanut butter, checked again an hour later. She was at 103. I nodded. "That's good." She sipped quietly, then said, "I didn't write it down just for you to see. I did it because it helped me focus. Like if I could get that part right, maybe the other stuff wouldn't feel so messy." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some truths don't need commentary. Mom emerged soon after, dressed and smiling, her earrings on, a small but unmistakable sign that she felt more like herself. Dad was outside already, cleaning up the grill and securing the chairs before we left. Everything moved in a kind of rhythm now, not perfect, but smoother. We had breakfast together, light, easy. Sierra made eggs. I poured juice. Dad cracked jokes about the one trout he caught that was technically legal size, and Mom shook her head like she always did, pretending she hadn't heard that same story 17 times. It was normal, remarkably normal. By mid-morning, our bags were packed. The fridge cleaned out, the trash taken down to the bins by the road. We stood on the deck for a moment longer than necessary, just looking at the lake. No one rushed. No one filled the silence with stories. It wasn't that we didn't have anything left to say. It was that, for the first time, we didn't need to say it all at once. Sierra walked over and handed me a folded paper towel. I wrote you something else. It's not long, just something I wanted to say but couldn't get out loud. I slipped it into my jacket pocket without opening it. I'll read it later. I figured. We loaded into the car, Mom up front with Dad, Sierra and I in the back. The drive was quiet at first, just winding roads and trees that were starting to flirt with the first hint of fall. I leaned my head against the window and let the silence wrap around me. About 20 minutes into the drive, Sierra broke it. "You remember that time we went to the beach when we were kids?" she asked. "And Mom forgot sunscreen, so we made that stupid tent out of towels and sticks." I nodded. "You got so sunburned your nose peeled for days." "I thought I was gonna die," she laughed. "You sat next to me that night with a bowl of aloe and kept reapplying it every hour like some tiny, overbearing nurse. I was 11. You were already like this," she said. "Already saving people." I turned to her. "And you were already creating chaos." She laughed again. "Yeah, I was." We didn't say anything after that, but it didn't feel unfinished. By the time we pulled into their driveway, the sun was high, the day warm again. We unloaded slowly. I helped Mom inside. She sat on the edge of the couch and sighed like someone who had returned from battle, but not broken. I checked her sugar one more time. 99. She winked. Stable. Dad made tea. Sierra unpacked the cooler. I stood in the middle of the kitchen and just watched it all. Not waiting to be called on. Not waiting for something to fall apart. Just witnessing. "I'm heading out," I said eventually. "I'll call you when I get back to Albany." Mom hugged me tight. Dad kissed my forehead. Sierra walked me to the door. "I know I can't undo everything," she said quietly. "You don't need to," I replied. "I'm gonna keep trying, though. That matters." I got in my car, started the engine. The paper towel note was still in my pocket. I pulled it out at the first red light. The handwriting was messy, rushed. "Claire, thank you for showing up. Even when I didn't deserve it. I'm still learning how to be someone who can carry their share. But you taught me what it looks like. I'll never forget that. S." I folded it slowly, tucked it into my glove box next to the maps I never used. The road stretched out ahead, long and open, lined with trees. And for the first time in years, I wasn't driving away from a fire. I was simply going home.